Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Caroline Woods, and for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be tackling the future of work, and more specifically, how tech and people are fueling inclusion. Joining me for this very important conversation are two CNBC favorites, Fran Katsoudas, Cisco's Chief People Policy and Purpose Officer, also a member of CNBC's Workforce Executive Council, as well as Jeetu Patel, Cisco's SVP and GM of Security and Applications, and a member of CNBC's Technology Executive Council. Fran and Jeetu, so good to have you both here with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
It's now been over a year since COVID was officially declared a global pandemic, and so many of us were forced or lucky enough to work from home and clearly still are. So Fran, let's start with you and kind of reflect back about the adjustments that companies have had to make, and you as a leader within Cisco have had to make as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's been a year. So for me personally, one of the biggest changes initially was I used to travel all the time. And my realization was it was how I connected, it was how I understood what our teams were thinking. And so I had to figure out a different way to do that. Something that's evolved is I now send out a weekly video to my teams where I'm connecting with them on the previous week, what I love, what I loathe, my priorities, just to drive that connection. So I think we're learning new ways. The other thing that I would say is in my role, what I saw was such a need from our employees for us to focus on well-being at a greater level than we ever have before. And I think the other big aha was that they were coming to us to get their questions answered on COVID, and they wanted to hear from their company. And it really created a new discussion with us for our people.
Jeetu, what about you? What adjustments have you had to make?
You know, the interesting part is I started the job at Cisco in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So in fact, Fran and I speak probably a few times a week, but I've never met Fran in person. We've only seen each other through the screen. And so, there's been a fair amount of adjustments. We have a 10-year-old daughter, and so making sure that you can it's okay for her to come into any meeting and crash a meeting and just make sure that she's part of something is a core part of Cisco's, kind of value set. And it's been great to make sure that you can have people actually see the more human side of how people actually get through a day. And the other thing that I found is this virtual world in some ways has actually gotten to be easier to deal with because I get to spend more time with my family and have more dinners with my daughter and that you didn't have before. But there is an adjustment where you miss that kind of engagement with people and the serendipity and the spontaneous interactions. And that's the thing that we have to get better at, because I don't think the technologies have been as good in that dimension as they have been on the planned communication side.
Turning back to you, Fran, you mentioned employees' well-being. What are you hearing and seeing from your employees, and what do they need help with the most at this point?
It's so interesting when you think about it, because so many of us around the globe at all companies within a period of days work dramatically differently than we ever had before. And so I think on the one hand, it's not surprising that all of us are trying to figure it out. What our people need help with, to be honest, is they just need us to tell them it's okay to step away. As a company, we have had 4 what we call days for me, where we basically tell our employees, we're going to make Monday a holiday around the globe. Just take some time for yourself. And what we're realizing is, despite the fact that our people have a lot of time off that they could use, they're just hesitant at this moment, and they don't know how to check out when they're still in the same place. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we're hearing from them. I think the other thing is just continuing to have the discussions around mental health and to really make it easy for them to get the support that they need at any given time. As a company, we really work hard to make this just a core part of the discussion that we have with our employees, and we think that's incredibly important.
It certainly is. And Jeetu, in terms of customers and partners, what are you hearing from them? What are their needs?
I think the thing that our customers are asking us about is we've done a good job now at the planned communications. We have, meetings that need to get scheduled and people can actually get in from different parts of the world and actually engage with each other. What we are finding though is customers as well as employees are, it's people are more fatigued by the end of it than they used to be in this kind of world. And so what do we need to do to make sure that people get the focus time? They're not just in, 12 hours of back-to-back meetings. How do you make sure that you provide those insights back to customers so that they know that, hey, I've actually been in 16 back-to-back meetings today for 30 minutes each, and that's probably not a healthy way to go for the entire week. So like getting that data to customers is also pretty important. And then the other thing I'd say is, in general, how can we make sure that there's a level of spontaneity that's captured, which was just assumed in the physical world? Like you just could look over someone and see what's there. I think there's a possibility of actually getting better at that, because what you could do now is at Cisco, for example, we have 70,000 employees. We all know, because of the technologies we use, when someone is available to ping versus not ping. And those kind of things are going to be pretty important to make sure that we just get better and better at. So it's not just the planned communication, but the spontaneous interactions that get better over time.
So building on that, Jeetu, what do you think business leaders should really keep in mind when they hear these wants and needs?
I think it's really important to make sure that firstly, the employees know that it's okay to take a break, and that it's okay to make sure that we're all just trying to figure out a mode, and no one's got this figured out. And one of the things that Fran and I were talking at one of our employee all hands with 70,000 people is we just told them how much we struggled sometimes, because on Friday evening we're just wiped out. And so it's okay for employees to know that senior leaders are struggling just as much as everyone else is, so that they can feel like it's okay to go out and vocalize that. The second thing that I think is really important is ensuring a degree of, blend between synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. Right now, what ends up happening is most of the communication that happens is synchronous. We're doing this right now all together. But as you start getting to be a more global organization and people are in different parts of the world, you don't have 8 hours a day of overlap time. In fact, you have an hour and a half, and that's if you work a 12-hour day. And so what do you do to make sure that there's a lot of things that can be done asynchronously that you don't need to all be together for, that can actually make it a little bit more productive, so that you can get some time back? And we're actually doing a lot more in encouraging people to say, send me a video of your thoughts in 10 minutes rather than actually having a 30-minute meeting, so that you can get 20 minutes back for yourself. And then I'll ask you a few questions asynchronously if we need to. And those things can fundamentally change the way that people think about how they're going to work and interact and engage with each other.
Well, Fran, it's clear that people are clearly at the heart of your organization and at the heart of your role, really. So talk to me about the importance of a people-first strategy and helping your people navigate through these many challenges, whether it be mental health or burnout, as we discussed, or COVID issues or social justice. There are so many hurdles to clear.
So funny, because I think regardless of how good any leadership team is, I don't think you can anticipate the needs of your people. I think you have to ask them, and then be willing to move with them as you learn more and you learn what's important. And so I think that's a big part of a people first strategy, is you just have to listen a ton, and you have to be open to points where you actually thought you were going to turn left and you actually need to turn right. I laugh a little bit because I was thinking about the meeting that Jeetu just referenced. So it was a 1 hour, I think an hour and a half meeting. We were talking about a ton of content, but it was the exchange that we had where we were talking about how on Friday nights we have like nothing left. It's just the end of the week and we're tired. And that exchange probably got more of a response than anything else. And so I think in addition to listening, I think we as leaders have to share the questions we have, the struggles that we have. I think we have to share the worries that sometimes we have, because our people have tremendous ideas and they can help us. And so from a Cisco perspective, we've engaged our people in our people strategy, our priorities. It's based off of their feedback. For a long time, we have been focused on something called conscious culture. I think it has never been more important than at this moment, because conscious culture is bottoms up. It makes the assumption that every single person owns culture. And I think for companies where culture is top down, that's going to be a problem in this new world of work. And so I think there hasn't been a more exciting time to really be focused on our people. They need us there. But I think it's also a big challenge at this moment.
And Jeetu, bringing in tech and inclusivity, how has technology played a role in this, and how is it fueling a more inclusive recovery and future?
I think I think we're just getting started, because if you really think about the potential that has now gotten to get mainstream realization during this COVID crisis, is that you've got 3 billion digital workers on the planet. And wouldn't it be nice if, regardless of their geography, regardless of their socioeconomic level, or their language preference, or their proficiency with tech, or their personality type, or they're an introvert or an extrovert, like, we just make sure that they have an equal opportunity to participate in the global economy. Look, I was an immigrant. I came here when I was 19, and I would have not had the same opportunity had I not immigrated. And I would like for the next generation to not have that be the limiter. And so I feel like there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to make that happen, because we can now not have geography be the limiter for how individuals look for opportunities and how companies search for talent. And so if we can just make sure we level the playing field with tech, I mean, what a great cause to be part of during our lifetime. And this is something that's been building up, but I think there was a catalytic event that happened, which was, by the way, terrible in so many ways, and I've lost family on it and so on and so forth, but it'll be the one thing that comes out of it is a realization that people anywhere around the world can participate and do amazing things from where they are, and they no longer will have that as being treated as a handicap, that you don't happen to be in a certain geography, so you won't be able to get access to the kind of things that other people can get access to. So,
Jeetu, talk to me about some of the new work trends being powered by some of your innovative collaborative tools that will connect people from, no matter where they are, or that do connect people, like WebEx.
yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we found is this notion of inclusivity around future of work is a really important thing to think about in how you build these products and experiences. So, for example, there are certain things that you just couldn't do in real life that now you can do in the virtual world in a much better way that makes the world more inclusive. We talked about one, which is geography, but let's just talk about another, which is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Typically, an introvert will stay quiet in the meeting, and an extrovert will suck out all the oxygen in the room like someone like me would. And so what you need to do is make sure that, is there a way that people get an equal voice? And so we added a capability in the product that says, well, if there's 4 of us that are debating, and we did this last night, so there are 4 of us debating a candidate that we need to hire. There were 2 people. And rather than me taking over or someone else taking over, everyone gets 3 minutes while the rest of them are on mute. And then once your 3 minutes are up, you go to the next one, and everyone gets their voice and their turn. And then once everyone's done, we can all sit down and debate. Imagine this societal impact on this if every introvert that typically doesn't get a chance to put in a word edgewise is now going to be able to participate in a dialogue, because they probably have some of the better ideas because they've been more thoughtful, and it's important to make sure that their voice is heard. So I think it's a fantastic possibility of the kind of things you can do with technology that actually just weren't possible in the past. I'll give you one other example. Is when I joined, I did a listening tour to start with about 1,000 employees. I actually literally sat with 1,000 employees, and we recorded every conversation and we transcribed every conversation. And some of those conversations didn't make sense to me until 2 days later when I had another conversation. And then I re-listened to the recording and then maybe shared the recording with someone else. And before you knew it, like, you had this kind of amazing wealth of information that started coming together. I would have never been able to have the fast on-ramp into things if I were doing it all in person. So like there are advantages on the tech side that we can really, completely think discontinuously in.
And Fran, bringing it back to the people, we already touched on this a bit, but technology isn't the only solution. So much of it is really about mindsets and behaviors and cultural permissions and skills that need to be developed. So how does that need to play into a more inclusive workspace?
Yeah, I would share maybe a few of our beliefs that are guiding us at this moment. And one of them we just talked about, which is we believe that digital can humanize the enterprise. And it's funny because I think for a long time, when people think about digital technology, the first response may be, uh-oh, what's going on here? And what Jeetu and team are building, I think, are ways for us to be so much more aware and inclusive. And that's just a perfect example of how technology is going to make us better. The other thing that I would say is that we're a big believer that empathy is a superpower. And so what that means from a workplace perspective is that we're going to work so hard to help our leaders and teams get proximate to people that are different from themselves and different paths and walk alongside them and understand. And we believe that if we do this, we will be so much better as a company. And then maybe the last thing that I would share is that one of our beliefs that we want our employees to understand is that we care about them even on the weekend. And what we mean by that is that we're so much more than the hours of the day that we work. And if we see our people completely, if we see them as mothers and fathers, if we see them as students, if we see them as folks that are worried about family members or friends, we can architect experiences that are better and really help them kind of navigate the load. And so those are some of the beliefs that I think at this moment are incredibly important for us.
All right, we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. We're making progress on the vaccine front, of course. So I want to talk to you about what the return to the office or the future of work is going to look like. What's this new normal going to look like, Jeetu?
Well, the way that we see it is the future of work is definitively going to be hybrid. Some days people are going to work from home. Other days they might choose to go into the office, and some days somewhere in between. And as and that's going to be actually a harder scenario to go out and orchestrate than what we've seen in the past, where it was easy when everyone was at the office. It was actually not as hard for everyone to move to working from home right away overnight. But now when you have a mixed mode, it's harder. And the reason it's harder is you want to make sure that the people that are not in the office, let's say there's 4 of us together and 3 of them that are remote. You don't want to have the 3 that are remote feel like second-class citizens. You want to make sure that they have an equal voice, that you want to make sure that they aren't feeling left out, that they can actually, see the body language and the facial expressions of the 4 people or 5 people or 10 people in the conference room. This just the same way as you and I are seeing each other right now. And that's going to be a pretty important kind of area of innovation as we move forward, is how do you make sure that as this mixed mode starts to evolve, that people feel an equal voice and an equal seat at the table, no matter where the table is. And that's an area that we're working really hard from the product and engineering perspective. But I think it's as much of a cultural change, is that it's okay when people are not in the office, and don't actually penalize someone because they aren't. And it's less about are you returning to the office or not, and it's more about do people want to return to the office, and give them the choice rather than dictating to them. And if they want to return, then they will, and that's great for them. And if they don't want to return, that's okay too, because now we've actually got a neutralizer in technology that won't make that a handicap.
I know many people with young kids at home that can't wait to return to the office. But Fran, what are you considering as you have to think about returning your employees to the office?
Yeah, the number one thing that we are realizing is that our leaders are going to play such an important role in this. I think it is such a different world. In the past, at other companies in particular, the leader would make a call around how a team would work. And I think those days are gone. And so what we are telling our Cisco leaders is that we want you to role model hybrid. We want you to make decisions around how your team works based on individual preferences and the work. And we know that there are some roles that will absolutely be in the office, and that's going to be work related. And we know for some teams, they may need to only connect perhaps once or twice a week, if at all, in the office. And so for us, the biggest thing is to really help our leaders navigate through that change. I've been saying this for years, but I think it becomes more and more true each year. I think to become a leader at this moment, it gets harder and harder, because I think leaders right now are so accountable to understand what's going on with every member of their team and how do we have to show up to help them be their absolute best. And that takes a lot of work and focus. And so that's what we're going to be really helping our leaders with. We actually are planning in May to take all of our teams offline for a few days and to really help train all of us around how we work in this new arena.
Very exciting times, and I'm sure you're both very excited to finally meet each other face to face, but that's all the time we have for today. Fran, Jeetu, thanks so much for your insights, and thank you to our audience for joining our session today. Please be sure to check out Cisco's Expo area, where you can learn more about this really important work. And now I'm just going to ask you to please click the main stage tab to the left side of your screen to tune into our next session. Thanks again.